Not a big fan of how I'm going to do this. All right, so I installed an electric fuel pump. We'll show you that because this mechanical one failed, had leaked some fuel into the engine, actually a significant amount, and needed to do something about it. So I replaced it with an electric pump, a low PSI one, but I'm still having issues with, even though it's a low PSI, so we're going to put a fuel regulator on it. And even though it says it's a 5 to 7 PSI or whatever the recommended is, but I did pick up a very inexpensive mixed reviews on this fuel regulator just off of Amazon, because if it doesn't work, then it's probably going to be something else. So I wanted to try this out. All right, so the issue we're having is when that fuel pump kicks on, it's just too much PSI, and it's actually blowing through the vent tube on the carburetor, and the needle is not able to seal it, or it's not enough there to seal off and stop that fuel from coming in. So we're going to throw the regulator on to help with that, but I'm also going to be pulling the top of the carb off because I believe that needle is gone bad, because if this sits at an angle, meaning if the front is higher than the rear, I get fuel rushing into the carb, which then goes down into the heads and eventually makes its way into the engine. And now it happened again. So we're going to pull the top of the carb, replace that needle, and I'm going to install this simple fuel regulator, and hopefully that fixes the issue. I'm going to test drive it and see what happens. All right, so to do just the needle, I'm not even going to bother pulling the whole carb off because it's just some flat heads up top. I had the fuel disconnected because I was sick of it pushing through randomly and leaking into the engine. So we have it disconnected for now. Out, and underneath is going to be our needle there. I swear I've replaced this more than once, but maybe this one was a bad one. I'm going to test it real quick, because if I can blow, let's see.
I'm here on the carburetor. Now, when I tell you to let go, I want you to let go and inhale hard.
It's not that accurate, but I am able to blow, and it sounds like there is air coming through even with this closed. So we're going to pull this one off and replace it. Okay, so I think truthfully I have not replaced it because I pulled out some of the stuff in my extra part carburetor parts, and I found one still in the bag, a new needle and seat. So it kind of just comes into one piece. Some of these would be separate on carbs I've dealt with, but this is all one piece. So we're going to pull out this old one. Very simple. There's 14 millimeter. We're going to replace it. I have a new gasket there. So as you can see, we're going to pull this out. There's the old one. There's the new one. We're going to throw on a new washer or seal. There's nothing too complicated. It's just a new needle. I mean, you can actually just order these alone, but I already have the kit. Snug it. I'm going to test it again. Let's see how this one does. That's actually a lot better. I know that there's no float holding this, and that's truly, you want to be holding this kind of at an angle so the float is putting the pressure on it. But when I blew through this one, there was still air escaping, just holding it completely level. And now there is no air escaping when I blow it level. So pretty sure this had a little leak in it, which was causing fuel to siphon itself out of the tank and into the engine at just that little bit of hill where just my driveway. I'm also tempted because this choke, as you could tell, is not doing a single thing at all. It's just flops around. So it's not springing closed. So I got that. I'm going to sit down, kind of get a different view here. And this is that new used carb, but I could see that this actually, let me do the throttle down. This one is actually springs closed. So that is closed, open. It is a little, maybe these aren't set right. The arm, yeah, this one's just not springing back all the way where it should be. It should be here, and it's not. I might just adjust this first before we pull it all apart, because you can actually turn your choke. If you compare these, you can see where I just realized that the hookup for this is more 12 o'clock, and this one's not. There's these little, yeah, I think it's actually just the choke itself's not set. I didn't even look, but it does. So there's these little grooves, and that's where you will line up a line on the choke itself, and this one's way off. So we're going to just start with loosening this and adjusting it kind of to match this one just before I go to pull it all apart if I don't need to. Because I believe the choke mechanism itself is working, where it's the heated one, so when it gets warm enough. But now we can see, so there is a faint line right there on the choke body itself, and then these grooves on the carburetor itself. And the way it's supposed to work that I've ever dealt with is you line it up with some of these, and that's your range of choke. So you want to line it up. We're going to do just the middle. That puts this basically at the 12 o'clock. And with that, you could see it's almost sprung all the way and springing all the way closed for the butterfly. So we'll just adjust it probably to the next line right there. I'm going to hold this so it doesn't move. Now you can see when I open this, it's closing all the way. So truthfully, that choke was just not adjusted right. So I'm going to leave it about right there. We're going to tighten down those 3 screws, and that'll actually be set. So we're going to get this snugged down so it doesn't rotate anymore. Let's get this back on now with the choke set properly. Hook up our fuel and our fuel regulator, and we're going to see how it runs after that. I'm just trying to take my time doing all this. This is where you can really mess up stuff. I'm just checking some of the functions, because now that I have that other carburetor that's also stock, I really want to get that regulator, get this, hopefully stops leaking into my garage, because it's not fun to come out to a smelly car, because that fuel gets in there, mixes with the oil and whatnot, and it is rancid. And this is even new fuel. And I'm tired of doing I think I've done 4 oil changes on this. I don't want to keep wasting my oil. Now that looks better, because our choke is actually, I'll show you, is now touching the throttle. So when I go to actually start it, it's going to be there. Here's what I'm talking about. This is now actually hitting. So before, this would just would fall down here or fall up, whatever. It would sit like this, and this actually never was used. I would have to push this back, pull this down, and have it touch it to get any kind of choke. But now, as you can see, this is coming back to the original position. I have it a hair away from the choke right here. As it says, it should be set, so it's not touching, but just a touch. So you see it'll still catch that last position on the choke. But that's a good spot right there for when I need to start it in the cold. I don't have to come back here now and mess with it. Now we're going to get our fuel line there, and we're going to run and stick our regulator, I think just on the side right here. Super easy to access, and it's right close to the carb, so it'll have a little more accuracy on the PSI, because if you have it all the way where the pump is, you might lose pressure through the line or something. It's not a big deal, but there is that chance. So I'm going to open this up, kind of get it built. We'll get it built on the table and ready to install there. So I've never messed with this kind of regulator. I hate that it's the cheapest one I found. It wasn't the cheapest, but it is a very inexpensive regulator. So it doesn't come with any fuel gauge, not really anything to tell you. Actually, it didn't even have instructions. So you got to push down and turn, and then you pull it up and it's locked in. This is like a 0 to 5. So I'm guessing 5 is 5 PSI and 4 is, it's to it. So we'll probably end up doing it like 3, kind of in the middle. Okay, that does say out and in. And what we're going to need to do is hook up these. So I'm using like the smaller 1/4 inch. It does come with hose clamps and the smallest little bits of fuel line. So I'm just going to splice into my fuel line and mount this where I kind of want to. It actually doesn't come with any mounting hardware. So we're just going to snug these down and double check that they're water fuel tight. I'm going to try to figure out a way to mount this. I thought it had like some type of something I could just screw it into. Not seeing that. Not a big fan of how I'm going to do this, but I think this will work out for now. Because if this does end up working, what I'll do is probably build a bracket that'll hold it, bolt to this, keep this nice and secure. But while we're figuring out to make sure this works, because this is super cheap, I'm going to use some clamps here and essentially just going to clamp around the hose wherever it is and then screw it. So the 2 hoses will hold this. I am going to just hook it up and see how it regulates. Probably even using that small little piece they gave me just to test it out. That way I don't go through all this trouble and it ends up being just trashed anyways. All right. This is not pretty by any means. We're gonna, since messing with it. All right. It's on there. Like I said, this is not permanent whatsoever. We're gonna make sure that it regulates fuel like it does, and then I'll remount it. I think I'm actually going to go on top right here, kind of bringing the fuel line up and over and into the carb. That way it's avoiding any kind of things down there. So it's nice having the Baja. You don't have to worry about trying to fit things up in here because you have plenty of room. That fuel pump lives right in there for now. There's the fuel in and fuel out. This was like the simplest way to hook it up. The power running up there to a switch, but I'm going to put some grommets around it so nothing happens. But this is just to get it going because it's getting so frustrated. But it's mounted underneath the hood. It's a temporary permanent spot. It's a pushing pump, not a pulling pump, so it's mounted as close to the fuel tank as I can get it. Most of your pumps, even your low PSI ones, are definitely a pusher, not a puller. So always, if you're doing electric, put it up front unless it specifies that it's a pulling pump. But let's get this cranked up real quick. Now that it's all hooked up, we're going to watch this now is doing its thing. So there's the choke, little fuel pump, and now we should crank it. So it's started right up with those points. It might need a little tuning on the carb again because points might be different, but we're going to give it a test run as is, see how it goes. Let's go take this for a cruise, and hopefully, I'm not jinxing myself, but I'm hoping it's going to run a little better because I haven't cruised this thing in a month or so. So I really want to get out and drive it because it's one of my favorite cars to drive. Sounding good. So basically, I'm excited to see what those high RPMs do. Now getting rid of the electronic ignition. So far, honestly, a little better. I know that second gear low RPM range isn't the best, but it definitely was dying out more. I mean, it's been a little while since I drove it, but from what I remember, just that first gear pull. It sounds crazy. It's not that fast, but it would barely get up there on first gear. I had already shifted into second. I mean, I definitely got more out of second than I have for a while. It definitely struggled a little bit. Third gear though, it's doing great. But yeah, second gear took them, like, it was struggling through the whole gear. I think I might have to tune up more of the carb. Maybe just a fuel regulator. Like I said, I don't have a PSI gauge on it. But I doubt it's starving the carb. The carb's getting starved. All right. No, that's definitely a difference. I think that distributor needs to be slightly adjusted because second gear, but I mean, I was going 35 in second uphill, and it was moving. I know before I could not do that. Also, I forgot to mention, I think the speedo's way off with these bigger tires. I don't think it's that accurate, but so I might be over revving. I need to get an RPM gauge on this to see, but definitely a big difference in the third gear. Okay, so I made a quick jaunt over to the coffee shop, and so far so good. And it definitely pulled, not as hard. I mean, it's a bug, right? That's a 1600. There's not much there. I'm definitely happier with it. It wasn't cutting out at lower RPMs. I'm able to get up past 30 on second gear, get into third, and third is great. It pulls really nice. So, like I said, I want to get a little more adjustments so I get a little more lower end torque, and we'll see from there. I'm going to turn up the fuel regulator just in case it is starving it. I don't think it's going to hurt it, and then we'll go from there. All right, I'm going to do a quick closer for this episode of the Baja bug. A little bit of maintenance done on it, and it runs great. As you can see, I was filming while I was driving it, and honestly, that was the first time driving it in probably a month since our last Cars and Coffee, actually. And once it warmed up, it ran awesome. That second gear hesitation is almost gone completely, so maybe just a little fiddling with the idle air mixture, get that right. But man, it's running so much nicer now, and it's great. Feels good. There's enough power as you can get in a 1600. I'm going to have to get this regulator all mounted up, and no surprise, the Jeep Chinese fuel line that they came in is already leaking. I caught it now. You can't see too much in there, but this line here is leaking. I have better fuel line here, so I'll use that and get rid of that. So I did just pinch it off just in case that leak turns into more. I don't want fuel everywhere, and obviously I'm glad nothing happened on the ride back. But there we go. Got rid of the crappy ignition. I definitely believe that was a knockoff Petronics, so don't order anything off of like Amazon or whatever. It's like $20. Definitely was garbage, because once I put these points back on, ran so much better. The fuel regulator, super cheap, and I'm hoping it's doing its job. It's hard to tell right now until I get that fuel pressure gauge in. And then the needle and seat are new, and I'm hoping that should be fixing a lot of issues as well. Anyways, kind of did all at once, and we got it done. Bug's running great.